The pregnancy test sat on the bathroom counter like a loaded gun. Two pink lines that shattered everything Ava Bennett thought she knew about walking away. 6 months of playing wife to Manhattan's most dangerous crime boss was supposed to end today with signed divorce papers and a check she desperately needed. One arrangement, clean exit, no strings attached. But those two lines changed everything. And when Luca Moretti's voice cut through her phone 30 minutes later, cold, commanding, final, with one word that stopped her heart, no. Ava realized the most terrifying truth of all. She had never been free to leave. If you want to see how this story unfolds, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The February rain hammered against the windows of Ava Bennett's studio apartment in Washington Heights like accusations she couldn't escape. She stood frozen in the cramped bathroom, staring at the pregnancy test balanced on the edge of the chipped porcelain sink, those two pink lines refusing to disappear no matter how many times she blinked. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when she was finally getting out. Her hands trembled as she set the test down, her reflection in the mirror showing a woman she barely recognized anymore. 24 years old, dark circles under hazel eyes that had seen too much in 6 months, auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun that she hadn't bothered to fix in days. She looked exhausted. She looked trapped. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had made a deal with the devil and was only now realizing the price. 6 months ago, Ava Bennett had been drowning. Medical bills from her mother's cancer treatment had piled up like tombstones, each one marking another piece of her future she'd sacrificed trying to save the woman who raised her alone. When her mother finally lost that battle, the debt didn't die with her. It transferred to Ava like an inheritance of suffering, $73,000 that swallowed her nurse's aide salary whole and still demanded more. That's when Luca Moretti found her. Or rather, that's when his people found her, working a double shift at Mount Sinai, so tired she could barely stand, serving coffee to a man in an expensive suit who left a business card that simply read, "A solution to your problem." She should have thrown it away, should have recognized the danger in an offer that seemed too perfect. But desperation makes people do things they never imagined possible. And 3 days later, Ava sat across from Luca Moretti in a private room at an Italian restaurant in Little Italy, listening to a proposition that sounded insane. 6 months, Luca had said, his dark eyes assessing her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. He was devastating in person, 6'2", broad-shouldered, with black hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive everything. Power radiated from him like heat. You play the role of my wife. Public appearances, family dinners, nothing more. In exchange, your debt disappears, and you walk away with $200,000. Why? Ava had asked, her voice barely steady. Why me? Because you're nobody, he'd answered with brutal honesty. No family, no connections, no one who'll miss you if things go wrong. And because you're desperate enough to say yes, but smart enough to keep your mouth shut afterward. He wasn't wrong. Ava had signed the contract that night, her signature shaking on the line that sold 6 months of her life. The wedding happened 72 hours later in a private ceremony with 2 witnesses she'd never met. Luca slipped a platinum band on her finger that probably cost more than she'd make in 5 years. Kissed her once, for the officiant, a brush of lips that somehow burned, and then led her out to a waiting car. The arrangement was simple. She lived in her own apartment, he lived in his penthouse in Tribeca. They appeared together when necessary, charity galas, business dinners, family events where Luca needed the legitimacy of a wife. She played her part perfectly, the quiet, devoted spouse who smiled at the right moments and never asked questions about the men in expensive suits who treated Luca like royalty and everyone else like obstacles. She wasn't stupid. She knew what Luca Moretti was. Everyone in New York knew. The Moretti family controlled half the city's underground, gambling, protection, construction contracts that always went their way. Luca had inherited the empire from his father 5 years ago and expanded it with ruthless efficiency. He was dangerous, he was powerful, and for 6 months, he was technically her husband. But it was all pretend, a business transaction. Ava had convinced herself it meant nothing, that she could walk away clean when the time came. She'd carefully kept her distance, maintained the professional boundaries, never let herself forget this was temporary. Except somewhere along the way, the lines had blurred. It started small. The way Luca's hand would rest on the small of her back at events, proprietary and protective. the way his eyes would track her across a room like he couldn't help himself. The conversations that lasted longer than necessary, his questions about her life before him revealing genuine curiosity rather than mere performance. And then 3 months in, everything changed. They'd attended a wedding for one of Luca's associates, a lavish affair at a hotel in Manhattan where champagne flowed and men in expensive suits discussed business in hushed corners. Ava had worn a green dress Luca's assistant had picked out, something elegant that made her feel like someone else entirely. She'd caught Luca staring at her more than once, his expression unreadable. After the reception, he'd driven her home himself instead of sending his driver. They'd sat in his car outside her building, rain drumming on the roof, and something in the air between them had shifted. Charged. Dangerous. "You played your part well tonight," Luca had said quietly, his eyes on her face in the dim light. "That's what you pay me for," Ava had replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Is it?" His hand had reached out, fingers brushing her cheek with unexpected gentleness. "Is that all this is to you?" She should have said yes, should have reinforced the boundaries. Instead, she'd leaned into his touch, her breath catching, and whispered, "I don't know anymore." Luca had kissed her then, not the performative brush of lips from their wedding, but something real and consuming that set her entire body on fire. She'd kissed him back, 6 months of tension exploding between them, and when he'd pulled away, they were both breathing hard. "This is a mistake," she'd whispered. "Probably," he'd agreed, and kissed her again. They'd ended up in his penthouse that night. Ava told herself it was just physical, just a release of tension, just one night that wouldn't change anything. But in Luca's bed, with his hands on her skin and his mouth whispering her name like a prayer, it had felt like everything she'd been trying to avoid. It happened again, and again. Secret nights when the pretend marriage became something terrifyingly real. Luca never said it was more than physical, never promised anything beyond what the contract outlined. But the way he looked at her, the way he touched her, the way he held her afterward like he couldn't bear to let go, it told a different story. Ava had been careful. Birth control pills she'd been on for years, never missing a dose. But apparently, even the most careful plans could fail. Because now she stood in her bathroom, staring at a positive pregnancy test, and the 6-month arrangement that was supposed to end today had just become infinitely more complicated. The divorce papers sat on her kitchen counter. Luca's lawyer had delivered them 3 days ago with a thick envelope containing the promised $200,000. All she had to do was sign, and this chapter of her life would close. The debt would be gone. She'd be free. Except nothing about this situation was simple anymore. Her phone buzzed on the bathroom counter, the vibration sharp in the silence. Luca's name lit up the screen. Her heart kicked against her ribs as she answered. "Ava!" His voice was its usual controlled calm, but something underneath made her grip the phone tighter. "We need to talk." "Where are you?" "Home," she managed. "Why? What's wrong?" A pause that lasted too long. "Stay there. I'm sending Marco to pick you up. Don't go anywhere, don't talk to anyone. Understand?" Fear spiked through her. "Luca, what's happening?" "Just do what I say." The line went dead. Ava stood frozen, her mind racing. In 6 months, Luca had never sounded like that. Tense, urgent, almost worried. Something was very wrong. She looked down at the pregnancy test still sitting on the sink, those 2 pink lines that represented a complication she hadn't begun to process. She needed to tell him. But how do you tell a man who'd married you as a business arrangement that the pretend marriage had created a very real consequence? How do you tell someone who'd made it clear this had an expiration date that the timeline just got a lot more complicated? 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up outside her building. Marco, one of Luca's security team, stood by the rear door, his expression carefully neutral as Ava climbed inside. He didn't speak during the drive to Tribeca, and Ava didn't ask questions, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as anxiety twisted through her stomach. The pregnancy test was tucked in her purse. She didn't know why she'd brought it. Maybe as proof. Maybe as a talisman. Maybe because leaving it in her apartment felt like abandoning the truth. Luca's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building overlooking the Hudson. Ava had been here dozens of times over the past 6 months, but it still took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars, art on the walls that belonged in museums. It was beautiful and cold, much like the man who owned it. Except Luca wasn't cold when he opened the door. He looked furious. Inside, he said, his hand closing around her wrist as he pulled her through the threshold. Marco took up position outside as the door closed, leaving them alone in the vast space. "What's going on?" Ava demanded, yanking her wrist free. "You scared the hell out of me. Did you take anything from my office?" Luca cut her off, his dark eyes boring into hers. "Any documents, flash drives, anything?" She stared at him. "What? No, I've never even been in your office." "Someone did." He paced away from her, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration she'd rarely seen. Someone accessed files they shouldn't have, transferred information to an outside server. Financial records, client lists, operational details. 3 days ago. "And you think I—" Ava's voice rose in disbelief and hurt. "You think I stole from you?" "No." Luca turned to face her, and the fury in his expression wasn't directed at her. It was for her. "But someone wants me to think you did. Your name is all over the digital trail, your access codes, your login times. Whoever did this framed you perfectly." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Ava's feet. "That's impossible. I don't have access codes. I don't have any access to anything." "I know." Luca crossed the space between them in 2 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders. "I know you didn't do this. But the people who got robbed don't know you like I do. They see the evidence, they see your name, and they want blood." "What people?" Ava whispered, though she already knew the answer. "My associates. Partners in various business ventures who just lost a lot of money and a lot of sensitive information." His jaw tightened. "They think my wife betrayed me. Betrayed all of us. And they want to make an example." The word wife hung in the air between them, a title that was supposed to be meaningless, just part of the arrangement. But the way Luca said it now, with his hands on her shoulders and fear flickering in his dark eyes, it sounded real. "The divorce papers," Ava said suddenly. "I was supposed to sign them today. We could tell them it was fake, that I was never really—" "No." The word came out hard and final. "Absolutely not." "Why not? If they know it was just an arrangement, maybe they'll realize I had no reason to." "Because if they know it was an arrangement, you become disposable." Luca's hands tightened on her shoulders. "Right now, you're my wife. That means something. That gives you protection, makes them think twice before touching you. The second they know you were just a contract, you're nothing but a loose end they'll want eliminated." Ava's breath caught. "Eliminated?" "I won't let that happen." His voice dropped, fierce and possessive. "You're under my protection now. You stay here with me until I figure out who did this and clear your name." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." She should have argued, should have demanded other options, insisted on calling the police, something. But the look in Luca's eyes told her everything she needed to know. This was beyond police, beyond law, beyond anything resembling normal justice. This was his world, dark and dangerous, and she'd become collateral damage in someone else's game. "Okay," she whispered. "But Luca, there's something I need to tell you." A sharp crack split the air. The window behind Luca's head exploded in a shower of glass. He moved before Ava could scream, slamming her to the floor and covering her body with his as more windows shattered, bullets tearing through the penthouse in rapid succession. The gunfire was deafening. Glass rained down around them. Ava couldn't breathe, couldn't think, Luca's weight pressing her into the marble floor as chaos erupted above them. She heard shouts from the hallway, return fire from Marco and the other security, the sharp ping of bullets hitting metal and stone. It lasted maybe 30 seconds. It felt like hours. When the shooting finally stopped, silence fell heavy and terrible. Luca lifted his head slightly, his body still shielding hers, blood running down the side of his face from a cut caused by flying glass. "You okay?" His voice was rough, urgent, his hands running over her checking for injuries. "Ava, talk to me. Are you hurt?" No. She was shaking, her ears ringing. "You're bleeding. It's nothing." He pulled her up, keeping low, and half carried her away from the destroyed windows toward an interior hallway. Marco appeared, weapon drawn, his expression grim. "Shooter was in the building across the street," Marco reported. "Long rifle, professional setup. They're gone now." Luca's face was a mask of cold fury. "Put the building on lockdown. I want security doubled, and get Victor on the phone. Now." Marco nodded and disappeared. Luca turned back to Ava, his hands framing her face, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me. This just became very real, very fast. Someone isn't waiting for proof or explanations. They're coming for you directly. I didn't do anything, Ava said, and hated how her voice shook. Luca, I swear. I know. He kissed her forehead, quick and hard. I know, baby. But we're past the point where that matters. Someone set you up, and now someone's trying to finish the job. Until I find out who and why, you don't leave my sight. Understood? She nodded, still trembling. The pregnancy test in her purse felt like a stone. The secret she'd been about to reveal now buried under attempted murder and shattered glass. Luca pulled out his phone, barking orders to whoever answered. Ava sank onto a chair in the hallway, her hands pressed to her stomach in a gesture that was becoming instinctive. Inside her, barely a cluster of cells, a life was beginning that knew nothing about bullets or betrayal or the dangerous world she'd stumbled into. A life that made everything infinitely more complicated. She had to tell Luca. But as she watched him coordinate security and make calls to people whose names she didn't want to know, as she felt the echo of gunfire still ringing in her bones, the words stuck in her throat. Not now. Not in the middle of this. She'd tell him when things calmed down, when they were safe, when she could think clearly enough to explain. But looking at the shattered windows and the blood on Luca's face, Ava wondered if safe was something she'd ever feel again. The arrangement that was supposed to end today had just become a prison, and the man she'd pretended to marry was now the only thing standing between her and a bullet with her name on it. Luca returned to her side, crouching down so they were eye level. I need you to trust me, he said quietly. Can you do that? Ava looked into his dark eyes, this man who was both stranger and something far more complicated, and made a choice. Yes. Good. He stood, pulling her up with him. We're leaving. I have a safe house outside the city. We'll go there while I work on finding out who's behind this. What about the divorce papers? Something flickered across his face, an emotion too quick to name. Forget the papers. You're not going anywhere. It should have sounded like a threat. Instead, it sounded like a promise. And as Luca led her toward the private elevator that would take them to the garage below, his hand tight around hers, Ava felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on her chest. She was carrying the child of a man who'd hired her to play pretend. She was framed for a crime she didn't commit. Someone wanted her dead. And the only person who could protect her was the same person she'd been trying to escape. The elevator doors closed, sealing them in reflective steel. Ava caught her reflection, pale, frightened, lost. And beside her Luca Moretti, blood on his face and murder in his eyes, looking every inch the dangerous man she'd known he was from the beginning. 6 months ago, she'd signed a contract that sold her freedom for money. Today, that contract had become something far more binding than any legal document, a matter of survival, protection, and a connection she couldn't name but could no longer deny. The arrangement was supposed to end today. Instead, it was just beginning. And this time, the stakes were life and death. The elevator descended into darkness, carrying them both toward a future neither had planned but now couldn't escape. And in her purse, a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines waited to make everything even more impossible. Outside, Manhattan glittered in the rain, indifferent to the violence that had just shattered the night. The city that had witnessed their arranged marriage would now witness whatever came next, protection or possession, salvation or destruction, love or something far more dangerous. Ava didn't know which it would be, but as Luca's hand tightened around hers and the elevator plunged deeper into shadow, she knew with absolute certainty that there was no walking away now. The arrangement had ended the moment someone put a price on her head. What replaced it was something far more terrifying and far more real than any contract could ever be. The safe house sat 40 miles north of the city, hidden behind iron gates and dense woods that turned black in the rain. Ava watched through the SUV's tinted windows as they approached, exhaustion pulling at her bones even as adrenaline still hummed through her veins. The drive had taken 90 minutes, Marco at the wheel with another security vehicle trailing behind them, Luca silent beside her with his phone pressed to his ear for most of the journey. She'd caught fragments of his conversations, names she didn't recognize, threats delivered in Italian, orders given with the absolute authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Each word reminded her exactly who she'd tangled herself up with. Each clipped command a reminder that the gentle lover who'd held her in the dark was only one face of a much more dangerous man. The house itself was modern and sprawling, all glass and stone nestled into the hillside like a fortress pretending to be a home. Security cameras tracked their approach. Floodlights illuminated the driveway. Armed men waited at the entrance, their faces familiar from Luca's usual detail. "How long have you had this place?" Ava asked as Marco pulled to a stop. 3 years. Luca pocketed his phone, his eyes scanning the perimeter with automatic vigilance. "It's registered under a shell company, completely off the books. No one knows about it except my most trusted people." "And you trust them?" His gaze cut to hers, something dark flickering in those depths. "I trust them more than I trust most. But after tonight, I'm not sure I trust anyone." He climbed out, coming around to open her door before she could do it herself. His hand extended toward her, palm up. "Come on, let's get you inside." Ava took his hand, letting him pull her from the vehicle. The rain had followed them from the city, turning the night air cold and sharp. She shivered, and Luca immediately shrugged out of his jacket, draping it over her shoulders. It smelled like him, expensive cologne and something darker, more masculine. "I'm fine," she protested weakly. "You're shaking." His hand pressed against the small of her back, guiding her toward the entrance. "Inside, now." The interior was warm, all dark wood and leather furniture arranged around a massive stone fireplace. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the valley below, the city lights visible in the distance like fallen stars. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt like a cage, beautiful and inescapable. Marco and 2 other guards swept through the house, checking rooms and securing entry points. Luca led Ava to the main living area, his hand never leaving her back, that possessive touch both comforting and unnerving. "Sit," he instructed, gesturing to the leather sofa. "I'll get you something to drink." "I don't need—" "Ava." He turned to face her fully, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. Fear lived there, carefully controlled but unmistakable. "Please, just let me take care of you." She sank onto the sofa without another word. Luca disappeared into what she assumed was the kitchen, leaving her alone with the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on her chest. The pregnancy test was still in her purse, that secret growing heavier with each passing minute. She needed to tell him. But how? The timing couldn't be worse. Framed for theft, targeted by assassins, trapped in a safe house with a man who'd married her as a business transaction. Adding a pregnancy to that mess felt like throwing gasoline on a fire already burning out of control. Luca returned with a glass of water and a tumbler of whiskey for himself. He handed her the water, then sat beside her, close enough that their thighs touched. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the only sound the rain against the windows and the low murmur of Marco's voice as he coordinated security outside. "I'm sorry," Luca said finally, his voice rough. "This isn't what you signed up for." Ava turned to look at him, this man who'd become so much more than a contract. The cut on his face had stopped bleeding, but dried blood still streaked his temple. His shirt was torn, his hair disheveled. He looked dangerous and exhausted, and somehow more real than she'd ever seen him. "No," she agreed quietly. "It's not. I'll find who did this." His hand found hers, fingers lacing through hers with easy familiarity. "I'll clear your name and make sure you're safe. That's a promise. And then what? The arrangement ends, I sign the papers, and we both pretend the last 6 months never happened?" Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or regret. "Is that what you want?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither seemed ready to explore. Ava's free hand moved to her stomach in that unconscious gesture, and Luca's eyes tracked the movement. "Are you hurt?" Concern sharpened his voice. "Did you get hit by glass? I should have had a doctor check you." "I'm fine." She pulled her hand away from her stomach quickly, guilt twisting through her. "Just tired." Luca studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes seeing too much. Then he stood, draining the last of his whiskey. "You should rest. I'll show you to a room." He led her upstairs to a bedroom that was somehow both luxurious and impersonal, a king-sized bed with expensive linens, another wall of windows looking out at the rain-soaked valley, a bathroom with heated floors, and a shower big enough for 3 people. It was beautiful and empty, much like everything else in Luca's carefully constructed world. "There are clothes in the closet," he said, lingering in the doorway. "They should fit. If you need anything—" "Luca." Ava turned to face him, her heart hammering. "Earlier, before the shooting, I was trying to tell you something." He went very still, his full attention fixed on her. "I'm listening." The words were right there, balanced on the tip of her tongue. "I'm pregnant. We're having a baby." Everything just got infinitely more complicated. But looking at his face, at the tension in his shoulders, and the weight he already carried trying to protect her, she couldn't do it. Not tonight. Not when he already had too much to handle. "Thank you," she said instead, the words feeling like cowardice. "For protecting me. For believing me when you could have just assumed I was guilty." Something in his expression softened. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands framing her face with surprising gentleness. "I know you, Ava. Maybe better than I should, given what this was supposed to be. But I know you." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "You're not capable of betrayal." "You can't know that. 6 months isn't enough time to really know someone." "Isn't it?" His voice dropped, intimate and rough. "I know you bite your bottom lip when you're nervous. I know you take your coffee black because you can't afford the calories from cream and sugar. I know you have a scar on your left hip from falling off your bike when you were 9. I know you cry at sad movies, but pretend you don't. I know the sound you make when I touch you here." His hand slid to the curve of her neck, and despite everything, heat flared through her. "I know more about you than I've ever known about anyone, Ava. So yes, I know you didn't do this." She should have pulled away, should have reminded him this was just an arrangement, just business, just temporary. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "This is dangerous." "I know. Not just the people trying to kill me. This, us. I know that too." His forehead pressed against hers, his breath warm on her lips. "Doesn't change anything. It should. But it doesn't." He kissed her then, and it tasted like whiskey and desperation, and all the things they'd been avoiding saying. Ava kissed him back, 6 months of careful boundaries dissolving in the heat between them. His hands were in her hair, her fingers clutching at his torn shirt, and for a moment the danger and fear and impossible complications faded into nothing but this. The connection they'd both been fighting, and the chemistry that refused to be denied. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca rested his forehead against hers again. "Get some rest. We'll figure this out in the morning." He left before she could respond, the door closing quietly behind him. Ava stood in the middle of the expensive bedroom, her lips still burning from his kiss, and her secret still locked tight in her chest. She pulled the pregnancy test from her purse, staring at those 2 pink lines that had upended everything. A baby. Luca's baby. A consequence that neither of them had planned, but that now existed regardless of their intentions. Tomorrow, she promised herself. Tomorrow she'd tell him. Once they had a night to breathe, once the immediate danger had settled, she'd find the words and the courage to explain that their arrangement had created something permanent. But tomorrow came faster than she expected, and it came with new complications that made confession impossible. Ava woke to voices downstairs, Luca's deep rumble and someone else, an older man's voice she didn't recognize. Pale sunlight filtered through the windows, the rain finally stopped. She'd slept maybe 4 hours, nightmares of gunfire and shattered glass chasing her through the dark. She pulled on one of the shirts from the closet, soft cashmere that hung to mid-thigh, and ventured downstairs. The voices grew clearer as she descended, and the tension in them made her steps slow. "Can't hide her forever," the unfamiliar voice was saying. "The Castellanos want blood, and every day you stall makes it worse." "I need more time." Luca's voice was steel wrapped in ice. "Someone set her up, and I'm going to find out who. And if you can't, what then? You ready to go to war over a woman you've known 6 months?" Ava froze on the stairs, her hand gripping the railing. "Watch your tone, Victor." Danger laced every word Luca spoke. "Ava is my wife. That means she's under my protection, and anyone who touches her answers to me." "Your wife?" Victor's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Come on, Luca. We both know what that marriage is. Don't let sentiment cloud your judgment." "My judgment is fine, and my marriage is none of your concern." Ava chose that moment to make her presence known, stepping into the living room. 2 pairs of eyes turned to her. Luca's dark and unreadable, and the other man's cold and assessing. Victor was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and a face that had seen too much violence. He looked at Ava like she was a problem to be solved. "Mrs. Moretti." Victor's tone was polite but empty. "I hope you slept well." "Who are you?" Ava asked, staying close to the stairs in case she needed to retreat. "Victor Castellano." He offered a thin smile. "I'm Luca's advisor. And unfortunately, the bearer of bad news." Luca crossed to Ava's side, his presence immediately protective. Victor was just leaving. In a moment, Victor's attention stayed fixed on Ava. I wanted to meet the woman causing so much trouble. See if she was worth all this complication. Enough! Luca's hand found Ava's, pulling her close. Say what you came to say, and get out. Victor's expression hardened. The Castellanos are meeting tomorrow night. They want explanations, they want their money back, and they want whoever stole from them punished. You need to give them something, Luca. A name, a body, proof of good faith. Otherwise, this situation escalates in ways none of us want. I'll handle the Castellanos. Will you? Because right now, it looks like you're choosing her over the family, over the business, over everything we've built. Victor's gaze shifted back to Ava, calculating and cold. No offense, sweetheart, but you're not worth a war. Get out! Luca's voice dropped to something deadly. Now! Victor held his ground for another moment, then nodded slowly. 24 hours, Luca. Find me answers, or I'll have to find my own solutions. He headed for the door, then paused. And for what it's worth? I hope she's innocent. I really do. But hope doesn't fix problems. Action does. The door closed behind him with quiet finality. Luca's hand was still wrapped around Ava's, his grip almost painful. He's right, Ava whispered. I'm not worth starting a war over. That's not your decision to make. Luca turned to face her, his expression fierce. Victor's old school. He sees everything as assets and liabilities, risks and rewards. He doesn't understand that some things matter more than business. Do they? To you? The question seemed to catch him off guard. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Yes, and that's the problem. Before Ava could ask what he meant, Marco appeared in the doorway, his face grim. Boss, we've got something. Luca's entire demeanor shifted, the lover disappearing behind the crime boss. What? Security footage from the building. We found who planted the access codes under Mrs. Moretti's name. Marco glanced at Ava, then back to Luca. You're not going to like it. Show me. They moved to a study off the main living area, where Marco had set up a laptop. Grainy security footage played on the screen, a figure in dark clothing entering what looked like an office, fingers flying over a keyboard. The timestamp showed 3 days ago, exactly when the theft had occurred. Can you enhance the face? Luca demanded. Marco typed something and the image sharpened. The figure's face came into focus, and Luca went absolutely still. No, he said quietly. That's not possible. Who is it? Ava asked, looking between the screen and Luca's expression. Michael Russo. Luca's voice was hollow. My former associate. He died 6 months ago. The room fell silent except for the hum of the laptop. Ava stared at the screen, her mind trying to process what that meant. If he's dead, Marco said carefully, then someone's using his access to frame both him and Mrs. Moretti. Someone who wants you to think it's a ghost. Or someone who wants me to know it's family. Luca's jaw clenched. Michael had a brother, Adrian. He blamed me for Michael's death, said I should have protected him better. You think Adrian Russo is behind this? Marco asked. I think Adrian wants revenge, and framing Ava is the perfect way to get it. Luca's hand slammed down on the desk hard enough to make everything jump. He knows hurting her hurts me. He knows it'll turn the other families against me, force me into a position where I have to choose between protecting my wife and protecting my business. So what do we do? Ava's voice sounded small even to her own ears. Luca turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. It wasn't just anger or determination, it was fear. Raw and real and directed entirely at her. We end this, he said, before Adrian makes his next move. But Adrian Russo was already 3 steps ahead, and his next move came faster than any of them expected, shattering the fragile safety of the house in the woods and forcing everything into the light, including the secret Ava had been carrying like a stone in her chest. By the time the sun set that evening, nothing would be the same, and the protection Luca had promised would be tested in ways none of them saw coming. The call came 2 hours later. Luca had been on the phone with various contacts, trying to track down Adrian Russo's location and confirm whether he was behind the frame job. Ava had retreated to the bedroom, nausea rolling through her stomach, whether from stress or early pregnancy she couldn't tell. She was staring at the pregnancy test again, trying to find the courage to walk downstairs and tell Luca the truth, when she heard the shouting. Her blood went cold. She shoved the test into the nightstand drawer and ran for the stairs, her heart hammering. Luca stood in the living room, his phone in one hand and murder in his eyes. Marco hovered nearby, his weapon drawn, and 2 other guards had appeared from somewhere, all of them on high alert. "What happened?" Ava demanded. Luca's eyes met hers, and what she saw there stopped her in her tracks. "Adrian just made contact. He wants to meet." "That's good, right? You can talk to him, explain he has 3 hostages." Luca's voice was flat, controlled in a way that meant he was barely holding it together. "3 of my people who were investigating the theft. He says, if I want them back alive, I bring you to him." The floor tilted beneath Ava's feet. "Me?" "It's a trap." Marco's tone was urgent. "Boss, you can't seriously be considering—" "I'm not bringing her anywhere near Adrian Russo." Luca cut him off. "But I need to respond. I need to buy time while we figure out where he's holding them." "He gave you 6 hours," Marco said grimly. "After that, he starts sending pieces." Ava's stomach lurched. 3 people were being held hostage because of her, because someone had decided to use her as a weapon against Luca. The weight of that guilt was crushing. "There has to be another way," she said. "Let me talk to him. Let me explain that I had nothing to do with—" "No." Luca crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders. "You don't go anywhere near him. You don't talk to him. You don't even think about sacrificing yourself, understand? But those people are my responsibility, not yours." His grip tightened. "I'll handle this." "How? He wants me, Luca. This is all about hurting you through me, so let me—" I said no. His voice rose, sharp enough to make her flinch. Then he seemed to catch himself, his expression softening slightly. "I'm not losing you, not to Adrian, not to anyone. I don't care what it costs." The confession hung in the air between them, too raw to be ignored. Ava stared at him, seeing past the crime boss to the man underneath, the one who'd held her in the dark and whispered her name like a prayer, the one who'd covered her body with his when bullets flew, the one who was looking at her now like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Luca," she whispered, "what are we doing?" "I don't know." His forehead pressed against hers. "But whatever it is, we're doing it together." Before Ava could respond, before she could tell him about the baby or the test or any of the complications growing between them, an explosion rocked the house. The windows blew inward in a shower of glass and fire, the concussive force throwing them both to the floor. Ava's ears rang. Smoke filled her lungs. Someone was screaming, maybe her, maybe someone else. Strong hands grabbed her, hauling her up, and through the haze she saw Luca's face, blood streaming from a cut above his eye, his mouth moving in words she couldn't hear. More explosions. The house was coming apart around them. Marco appeared through the smoke, firing at shadows Ava couldn't see. Return fire lit up the growing darkness. Men in tactical gear poured through the shattered windows, and Ava realized with dawning horror that the 6 hours Adrian had promised was a lie. He'd never intended to wait. Luca pulled her toward the back of the house, his arm wrapped around her waist, half carrying her as the battle raged around them. They made it to a hallway before more armed men cut off their escape. Luca shoved her behind him, his own weapon appearing in his hand with practiced ease. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Whatever happens, you stay behind me." The firefight that followed was brutal and quick. Luca moved with lethal precision, each shot finding its target, but there were too many of them. Marco went down with a bullet to the shoulder. The other guards were being overwhelmed, and through it all, Luca stood between Ava and the violence, an immovable wall of protection, until someone hit him from behind. Luca went down hard, and before Ava could scream, rough hands grabbed her. She fought, kicking and clawing, but they were too strong. A cloth pressed over her mouth and nose, chemical sweet and suffocating, and the world started to fade. The last thing she saw was Luca struggling to his feet, blood on his face and fury in his eyes, reaching for her as they dragged her away. The last thing she heard was him shouting her name. Then darkness swallowed everything, and Ava Bennett disappeared into the hands of a man who wanted nothing more than to destroy Luca Moretti through her. The arrangement that was supposed to end had become something far more dangerous than either of them imagined, and the secret she carried, the life growing inside her that neither of them knew about yet, was about to become a weapon in a war that had just turned deadly. Protection had failed. Now all that remained was survival, and the question of whether love could exist in the ruins of everything they'd built on lies. Consciousness returned in fragments. The throb of her skull, the taste of chemicals on her tongue, the rough texture of concrete beneath her cheek. Ava's eyes fluttered open to darkness broken only by thin streams of light cutting through boarded windows. Her hands were bound behind her back with zip ties that bit into her wrists. Her body ached everywhere, bruises blooming where rough hands had grabbed her during the kidnapping. The warehouse. She was in some kind of abandoned warehouse, the air thick with dust and the smell of rust and old oil. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, a rhythmic plink that echoed through the vast space. She tried to move, and pain lanced through her shoulders, her position on the floor having locked her muscles into cramping knots. How long had she been unconscious? Hours? A full day? Fear clawed at her throat as fragmented memories crashed back. The explosion, the gunfire, Luca's face as they dragged her away. Was he alive? Had they killed him after taking her? The not knowing was almost worse than the pain. Footsteps echoed across concrete, measured and unhurried. Ava forced herself to stillness, keeping her breathing even as someone approached. Light suddenly flooded the space as industrial fixtures buzzed to life overhead, making her squeeze her eyes shut against the painful brightness. "Good, you're awake." The voice was male, cultured, almost pleasant. "I was beginning to worry we'd used too much sedative." Ava opened her eyes slowly, squinting against the harsh light. The man standing over her was in his mid-30s, handsome in a cold sort of way, with dark hair slicked back and a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her old salary. He smiled down at her, and there was nothing warm in the expression. "My name is Adrian Russo," he said, crouching so they were eye level. "And you, Mrs. Moretti, are going to help me destroy the man who killed my brother." "I don't know what you're talking about." Ava's voice came out hoarse, her throat raw from the chemical they'd used to knock her out. "I didn't do anything." "No, you didn't." Adrian's smile widened. "That's what makes this so perfect. You're completely innocent, just a woman who made a deal with the devil and got caught in the crossfire. But Luca doesn't care about your innocence. He cares about you, and that's the weakness I've been waiting years to exploit." He stood gesturing to someone Ava couldn't see. 2 men appeared from the shadows, hauling her roughly to her feet. Her legs nearly buckled, pins and needles shooting through muscles that had been immobile too long. They dragged her across the warehouse floor to a metal chair bolted to the concrete, forcing her down and securing her ankles to the chair legs with more zip ties. Adrian pulled up a second chair, sitting across from her with the casual ease of someone in complete control. "Let me tell you a story, Ava. May I call you Ava? We're going to be spending quite a bit of time together, after all." She didn't respond. Her mind was racing, trying to assess the situation, looking for exits or weaknesses or anything she could use. But the warehouse was vast and empty, the exits too far away, and even if she could free herself from the restraints, there were at least 6 armed men scattered throughout the space. 6 months ago, Adrian continued, unbothered by her silence, my brother Michael worked for Luca Moretti. He was good at his job, logistics, moving product, keeping the supply chains running smoothly. But Michael had a problem. He liked to gamble, and he wasn't very good at it. He racked up debts to some very dangerous people, and when they came to collect, Michael panicked. Adrian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression almost conversational. He stole from Luca. Not much, just enough to cover his debts and buy himself some breathing room. But Luca found out, and Luca doesn't forgive theft. "I don't know anything about this," Ava said, forcing the words past her dry throat. "I never met your brother. I don't even work for Luca." "But you married him." Adrian's tone sharpened. "You stood beside him at events, smiled for the cameras, played the perfect wife. And somewhere along the way, it stopped being an act, didn't it?" "I've been watching, Ava. I've seen the way he looks at you, the way he touches you when he thinks no one's paying attention, the way he moved heaven and earth to protect you when I framed you for the theft." Understanding crashed through her like ice water. "You set me up. The access codes, the stolen files. That was all you." "Guilty." Adrian spread his hands. "I needed Luca vulnerable, needed him off balance and desperate. What better way than to threaten the one thing he actually cares about? Michael's death taught me something important. Luca Moretti doesn't have many weaknesses, but the few he has run deep. And you, my dear, are his greatest weakness of all." "He'll kill you for this." Ava's voice shook despite her effort to keep it steady. When he finds you? Adrian laughed, the sound echoing through the warehouse. Oh, he's going to find you. That's the entire point. I want him to find you. I'm counting on it. He stood, pacing slowly around her chair. You see, Luca thinks he's smart, thinks he can outmaneuver everyone, stay 3 steps ahead. But grief makes people stupid. Losing Michael broke something in me, and I've spent 6 months putting together a plan that uses Luca's own arrogance against him. He stopped behind her, his hands resting on the back of her chair. Ava felt his presence like a weight, oppressive and threatening. I've reached out to every family Luca has ever crossed, every rival who wants to see him fall. I've offered them proof of his vulnerabilities, shown them exactly how to hurt him, and tonight, when he comes charging in here to save you, he's going to walk straight into an ambush involving some very powerful, very angry people. Terror spiked through Ava's chest. You're going to kill him. I'm going to destroy him. Adrian's voice was soft, almost gentle. I'm going to take away everything he built, everyone he cares about, and leave him with nothing but ashes and regret, the same way he left me. Your brother stole from him, Ava said, anger cutting through the fear. You said so yourself. Whatever happened was Michael's own fault. Adrian's hand cracked across her face, hard enough to snap her head to the side. Pain exploded through her cheek, stars dancing across her vision. When she could focus again, Adrian was in front of her, his cultured mask slipping to reveal the rage underneath. Don't you dare speak about my brother, he hissed. Michael made mistakes, yes, but Luca could have given him a chance, could have let him work off the debt, prove his loyalty. Instead, he made an example of him, left his body in the river like garbage. His hand gripped her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. So now I'm going to make an example of Luca, and you're going to be the bait that brings him to me. He released her roughly, turning away. Ava could taste blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her cheek. Her face throbbed, and nausea rolled through her stomach in waves. She thought of the pregnancy test back at the safe house, those 2 pink lines that represented a life growing inside her even now. A life that Adrian Russo knew nothing about. A secret that might be the only leverage she had. There's something you should know, Ava said, her voice trembling but determined. Something that makes this plan of yours more complicated than you think. Adrian turned back, one eyebrow raised. Oh? And what's that? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them, stark and impossible to take back. I'm carrying Luca's child. So if you hurt me, if you use me to destroy him, you're not just killing me. You're killing his baby too. For a long moment, Adrian just stared at her. Then he started laughing, the sound building until it echoed through the warehouse. Oh, this is perfect. This is better than I could have possibly imagined. He crouched in front of her again, his eyes gleaming with malicious delight. Does Luca know? Ava's silence was answer enough. He doesn't. Adrian shook his head in wonder. You poor thing, carrying his child, and he doesn't even know. That makes this even more poetic. The family he could have had, destroyed before he even learns it exists. He stood, pulling out his phone. I need to make some calls. Adjust the plan. This information makes you even more valuable as bait. Please. The word came out broken, desperate. Please don't do this. The baby didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. But Luca did. Adrian's expression hardened. And you're both going to pay for his sins. He walked away, barking orders to his men in Italian. Ava sat bound to the chair, tears streaming down her face, her hand instinctively trying to move to her stomach, but caught by the restraints. She'd thought telling Adrian about the pregnancy might make him reconsider, might appeal to some shred of humanity. Instead, she'd just made herself a more valuable target. Hours crawled past. The men changed shifts, some leaving and others arriving. Through the boarded windows, Ava could see daylight fading to dusk. Her body ached, her wrists were bleeding from the zip ties, and the nausea had gotten worse. She didn't know if it was pregnancy-related or fear-related or simply the result of being drugged and beaten. She tried to stay focused, tried to think of ways out, but her mind kept circling back to Luca. Was he alive? Was he looking for her? Or had Adrian's attack killed him, leaving her truly alone? The sound of approaching vehicles cut through her spiraling thoughts. Multiple engines, tires on gravel, doors slamming. Adrian's men tensed, weapons appearing in hands as they took up defensive positions around the warehouse perimeter. Adrian himself appeared from an office area Ava hadn't noticed before, straightening his suit and checking his watch with the satisfaction of someone whose plan was proceeding perfectly. "Showtime," he said, grinning at Ava. "Your knight in shining armor has arrived. Let's see if he's smart enough to smell the trap." The warehouse's main door crashed inward with explosive force. Luca Moretti strode through the opening like an avenging angel, his face a mask of cold fury, flanked by Marco and at least a dozen armed men. His eyes swept the space, found Ava bound to the chair in the center of the warehouse, and something in his expression cracked. "Ava!" Her name came out rough, loaded with relief and rage in equal measure. "Luca, don't!" Ava screamed. "It's a trap! Get out of here!" But it was already too late. The doors at the far end of the warehouse burst open, and men poured in from all sides. Not just Adrian's soldiers, but others wearing different colors, different insignias. 3 rival families at least, maybe more, all armed and positioned to cut off any escape. Luca's men immediately raised their weapons, but they were outnumbered at least 3-1. Luca stood in the center of the kill zone, his gun held steady even as he realized the extent of the trap. "Hello, Luca." Adrian emerged from the shadows, hands in his pockets, completely at ease. "So good of you to join us. I was worried you might send someone else, but I should have known better. You're too possessive to let anyone else save your wife." "Let her go, Adrian." Luca's voice was flat, controlled, but Ava could see the tension in his shoulders, the barely leashed violence in every line of his body. "This is between you and me. She's not part of it." "Oh, but she is." Adrian circled closer, staying well out of Luca's reach. "She became part of it the moment you chose her over business, the moment you protected her instead of cutting her loose. Did you really think I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't see the great Luca Moretti finally finding something he cared about more than power? You want revenge for Michael? Fine. Take it out on me. But Ava walks away from this." "No." Adrian's smile widened. "See, that's not how this works. I don't just want you dead, Luca. I want you broken. I want you to feel what I felt when I pulled my brother's body out of the river. The helplessness, the rage, the knowledge that someone you loved was gone and there was nothing you could do to save them." He moved to stand behind Ava's chair, his hand resting on her shoulder in a mockery of casual affection. Luca's eyes tracked the movement, his jaw clenching so hard Ava could see the muscle jump. "Careful," Luca said softly, and the threat in that quiet voice was more terrifying than any shout. "Touch her again, and I'll make what happened to Michael look merciful." "Always so dramatic." Adrian's hand tightened on Ava's shoulder, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "But you're not in a position to make threats. Look around. You're outgunned, outmaneuvered, and out of options. The Castellanos, the De Lucas, the Ferraris, they're all here, and they all want a piece of the man who's been taking their territories and their profits for years. I just gave them the perfect opportunity." Men moved in the shadows, weapons glinting in the harsh warehouse light. Ava could see the math playing out on Luca's face. Too many enemies, not enough exits, no way to fight their way out without massive casualties on both sides. And even if they could fight, Ava was in the middle of the crossfire, bound and helpless. "Here's how this works," Adrian continued. "You're going to put down your weapons. All of you. Then we're going to have a conversation about power, territory, and the new order that's going to emerge once you're dead. Your wife gets to watch, of course. Seems only fair, given she's the reason you're here." "Don't do it," Ava said desperately. "Luca, don't give them anything. Just go." "Quiet." Adrian's hand moved from her shoulder to her throat, not squeezing, but the threat implicit. Luca's gun immediately centered on Adrian's head, but a dozen other weapons trained on Luca in response. "Let's all stay calm," Adrian said smoothly. "No need for anyone to die just yet. We have all night to decide who lives and who doesn't." "You kill me. You lose your leverage," Luca said, his eyes never leaving Ava. "The other families won't support you if I'm already dead. They want me to suffer first, same as you." "True." Adrian seemed to consider this. "Which is why I think we should start with your wife, show you what real suffering looks like before we end you." Terror shot through Ava like electricity. Luca took a step forward, and every gun in the warehouse seemed to shift toward him. "Touch her and there's no deal," Luca said, his voice dropping to something deadly. "No negotiation, no surrender. I'll burn this whole place down with all of us in it before I let you hurt her." "Even if it means she dies too?" Adrian asked. "She's dead anyway if I surrender. At least this way I take you with us." The standoff stretched, tension coiling tighter with each passing second. Ava could feel Adrian's hand still resting against her throat, could see the calculation in his eyes as he weighed his options. Around them, 24 armed men stood ready to turn the warehouse into a bloodbath. Then everything changed. One of Adrian's men, a guy Ava had noticed earlier standing near the eastern exit, suddenly turned his weapon on the soldier next to him and fired. The shot echoed through the warehouse like a starter pistol, and chaos erupted. Men started shooting, but not all in the same direction. Someone had turned, someone was feeding information, or had been bought, or had been working for Luca all along. Adrian's hand left Ava's throat as he stumbled back, confusion and rage crossing his face. "What the hell?" Luca moved like lightning. He crossed the distance between them in seconds, his gun speaking twice. Two of Adrian's closest guards went down, and suddenly Marco and the other men were pushing forward, taking advantage of the confusion. Gunfire lit up the warehouse in strobing flashes. Men fell on both sides. Someone cut the overhead lights, plunging everything into darkness broken only by muzzle flare and emergency lighting. "Get down!" someone shouted, but Ava was already ducking as best she could while still bound to the chair. Bullets whined overhead. Something exploded near the back of the warehouse. A car's gas tank, maybe, or something more deliberate. Fire bloomed orange and hungry, spreading fast through old wood and stored chemicals. Hands grabbed Ava's chair, and she started to scream until she recognized Luca's voice in her ear. "Hold still, I've got you." Something cold touched the zip ties at her wrists, a knife cutting through the plastic. Her hands came free, blood rushing back into her fingers in painful pins and needles. Luca was already working on her ankles, his movements quick and efficient, even as bullets chewed up the concrete around them. "Can you run?" he demanded. "Yes." She didn't know if it was true, but she'd crawl if she had to. The ankle restraints fell away. Luca pulled her up, his arm around her waist, taking most of her weight as her legs threatened to buckle. "Stay with me. We're going out the east exit. Marco's clearing the way." They moved through the smoke and fire, Luca's body between her and the worst of the gunfire. Men fought and died around them, but Ava couldn't process any of it. Her entire focus on putting one foot in front of the other, on staying upright, on trusting Luca to get them out. A figure appeared through the smoke ahead of them. Adrian, his suit torn and bloody, his face a mask of fury. He raised his gun, pointing it directly at Ava. "If I can't have my revenge," he snarled, "neither can you." Luca's hand came up, his own weapon centered on Adrian. For a frozen moment, they stood facing each other across 10 feet of smoke-filled warehouse, two men with guns pointed and fingers on triggers. Then Adrian smiled. "You'll never know if the bullet hit her or your baby first." Confusion flickered across Luca's face. "What?" Adrian fired, but someone slammed into him from the side, Marco, blood streaming from a shoulder wound, tackling Adrian and ruining his aim. The bullet went wide, sparking off concrete. Luca fired twice in quick succession, and Adrian went down, his body crumpling. Marco rolled off Adrian's body, gasping. "Boss, go! I've got this!" Luca hesitated for only a second, then nodded. He swept Ava into his arms, actually lifted her off her feet, and ran for the exit. Behind them, the warehouse continued to tear itself apart, rival families fighting each other, and Adrian's men while the building burned around them. They burst out into cold night air. An SUV waited with the engine running, one of Luca's men at the wheel. Luca practically threw Ava into the back seat, diving in after her as bullets pinged off the armored exterior. The driver hit the gas before the door was even fully closed, and they tore away from the warehouse in a screech of tires. Ava couldn't stop shaking. Adrenaline and fear and relief all crashed through her system at once. Luca's hands were on her face, her arms checking for injuries with frantic urgency. "Are you hurt?" "Ava, look at me. Are you hurt?" "I'm okay." The words came out choked. "I'm okay." "You're bleeding. Your wrists, just from the zip ties." "Luca, I'm okay." He pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her so tightly she could barely breathe. She felt him shaking, this dangerous, controlled man actually trembling as he held her. "I thought I lost you," he said into her hair. "When they took you from the safe house, I thought, I'm here. I'm safe. You found me." They stayed like that for long minutes, the SUV eating up distance between them and the burning warehouse. Finally, Luca pulled back enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. What Adrian said, about a baby. His eyes searched hers. "Ava, What did he mean? She'd planned to tell him gently, to find the right moment and the right words. Instead, it came out in a rush, raw and desperate. I'm pregnant. I found out the day everything went wrong, the day I was supposed to sign the divorce papers. I was going to tell you, but then the shooting happened, and then the kidnapping, and Her voice broke. I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner. Luca went absolutely still. His hands were still on her face, his eyes locked on hers, but every other part of him had frozen. The silence stretched so long Ava's heart began to crack. Say something, she whispered. Please. You're pregnant. His voice was hollow, like he couldn't quite process the words. With my child. Yes. And you didn't tell me. I was afraid. I didn't know how you'd react, didn't know if you'd even want it? Something in his expression shattered, the careful control giving way to raw emotion. Ava, I almost lost you tonight. I walked into that warehouse knowing it was a trap, knowing I might die, and the only thing I cared about was getting you out. And now you're telling me you're carrying my child, and I almost lost both of you before I even knew. His voice broke. He pulled her against him again, his face buried in her hair, and Ava felt wetness against her temple that might have been tears. I'm sorry, she said again. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. His voice was muffled but fierce. Don't you dare apologize. Just promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll never keep something like this from me again. Promise me we're done with secrets. I promise. He kissed her then, desperate and claiming and full of everything they'd both been too afraid to say. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ava could see something new in his eyes, not just desire or possessiveness, but wonder and fear. How far along? He asked. Maybe 6 weeks? I only just found out. His hand moved to her stomach, resting there with unexpected gentleness. You're really pregnant. I'm really pregnant. A sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob. We're having a baby. Are you? Ava's voice shook. Are you okay with this? I know it wasn't part of the plan, wasn't part of the arrangement. The arrangement ended the moment I realized I couldn't let you go. Luca's thumb traced patterns on her stomach through her shirt. This baby, you're the only real thing in my life. Everything else is business, power games, violence. But this, us, that's real. Tears spilled down Ava's cheeks. I love you. I know I shouldn't. I know it's complicated and dangerous, and we started as a lie, but I love you. I love you too. The words came out rough but certain. I've loved you for months, maybe from the beginning. I just didn't want to admit it because admitting it meant accepting I had something to lose. His hand pressed more firmly against her stomach. Now I have everything to lose, and I'll burn the world down before I let anything happen to either of you. The SUV continued to speed through the night, carrying them away from the warehouse and Adrian's failed revenge. Behind them, sirens wailed as emergency services responded to the fire and gunfire. But inside the armored vehicle, Luca and Ava sat wrapped in each other, the truth finally spoken, the secret finally shared. A baby. A real marriage. A future that was terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. The arrangement that had brought them together was nothing but ashes now. What rose from those ashes was something neither had planned but both now refused to live without. And as Luca's hand stayed pressed protectively against her stomach, and Ava leaned into his strength, they both understood that the hardest part wasn't over. They still had enemies, still had complications, still had the whole violent world of Luca's business to navigate. But they would do it together, as husband and wife, as parents, as two people who'd found something real in the middle of something fake and refused to let it go. The warehouse burned behind them, taking Adrian's revenge and the last remnants of their pretend marriage with it. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and a future that would require them to fight for every moment of happiness. But as Luca kissed her again and whispered promises against her lips, Ava knew they'd already survived the worst. Everything else they'd faced together. And that made all the difference. The safe house they arrived at was different from the first. Smaller, more isolated, hidden deep in the mountains of upstate New York, where cell service was spotty and the nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. Luca carried Ava inside despite her protests that she could walk, his arms locked around her like he couldn't bear to let go. The driver disappeared to secure the perimeter while Luca kicked the door shut behind them and finally, reluctantly, set her on her feet in the main room. The space was rustic but comfortable. Exposed beams, a stone fireplace, furniture that looked handmade. Nothing like the modern glass and steel of the previous location. This place felt lived in, human, like somewhere people actually called home rather than just a strategic retreat. "Sit," Luca ordered, guiding her to the leather sofa. "I need to check you over properly." "I'm fine," Ava said, but she was already sinking onto the cushions, exhaustion crashing over her now that the adrenaline was fading. Her wrists throbbed where the zip ties had cut into skin, her face ached where Adrian had struck her, and nausea rolled through her stomach in waves. Luca disappeared into what she assumed was a bathroom and returned with a first aid kit. He knelt in front of her, his hands gentle as he examined her wrists, cleaning the torn skin with antiseptic that stung enough to make her wince. "Sorry," he murmured, his touch becoming even more careful. "I know it hurts." "It's not as bad as it looks." "You're bleeding. It's bad enough." His jaw was tight as he wrapped gauze around her wrists, his movements practiced and sure. "What else? Did he hit you anywhere besides your face?" "Just my face. And he grabbed my shoulder hard, but it's just bruised." Luca's hands moved to her face, tilting it toward the light so he could examine the darkening bruise on her cheek. His expression went cold and murderous. "I should have killed him slower." "Is he dead?" Ava asked quietly. "Adrian?" "Yes." No hesitation, no remorse. Marco made sure of it before they evacuated. Adrian Russo won't hurt anyone else. And she should have felt something about that. Horror, maybe, or guilt that a man was dead because of her. Instead, she felt only relief. Adrian had been willing to kill her and her unborn child for revenge. His death meant one less threat, one less nightmare waiting in the shadows. Luca seemed to read her thoughts. "Don't feel bad about being glad he's gone. He made his choices, and he paid for them." His thumb brushed carefully over her uninjured cheek. "How's your stomach? Any cramping or bleeding?" The question made her heart stutter. "You think the baby? I think you were drugged, tied up, and terrified for hours. I need to know if you're having any symptoms that might indicate a problem." His hand moved to rest against her stomach again, that gesture already becoming familiar. "We should get you to a doctor. Have you checked properly?" "I haven't even seen a doctor yet for the pregnancy. I only found out 2 days ago." Something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, or the weight of everything they'd missed because of secrets and circumstances. "Then we definitely need to get you checked. Tomorrow I'll have someone come here, someone I trust who won't ask questions." "You know a doctor who makes house calls to secret safe houses?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I know a lot of people who do things they wouldn't normally do when I ask. Benefits of being who I am." "You mean benefits of being terrifying?" "That too." He finished bandaging her wrists and sat back on his heels, his eyes searching her face. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Ava's stomach clenched. "Okay. The pregnancy. Is it really mine?" He held up a hand when she started to protest. "I'm not accusing you of anything, but we were careful most of the time, and the timing seems I just need to know for certain." The question hurt, but she understood why he had to ask. In his world, trust was currency, and they'd built their entire relationship on a foundation of lies and contracts. "It's yours. I haven't been with anyone else. There's been no one but you since before we even got married." "Birth control?" "Pills. I missed a dose when my mother died, and I was so stressed I forgot to double up like you're supposed to. It was just one night, about 6 weeks ago." She remembered that night vividly, Luca holding her while she cried about her mother, comfort turning to something else, neither of them thinking clearly enough to be careful. "I never thought one mistake would—" "It's not a mistake." His voice was fierce, his hands framing her face again. "Don't call our baby a mistake." "I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant, but this child is the only thing in my life that isn't built on violence or business deals or calculated moves. This is real, Ava, maybe the only real thing I've ever created." His forehead pressed against hers. "I'm terrified. I have no idea how to be a father. But I want this. I want you. I want the family we're building, even though it's the most dangerous thing I could possibly have." Tears spilled down Ava's cheeks. "Why is it dangerous?" Because people will use it against me. Use you against me. What happened with Adrian is just the beginning. Every enemy I have will see you and this baby as my weakness, as leverage they can exploit. His hand slid to her shoulders, his grip firm but careful. I can protect you. I will protect you. But you need to understand what you're signing up for if you stay with me. It's not going to be safe. It's never going to be completely safe. I know. Her hands covered his where they rested on her shoulders. I've known what you are since the beginning, Luca. I knew when I signed the contract, and I knew every time I got into bed with you. You're dangerous and ruthless, and you do terrible things. But you're also the man who held me when my mother died. The man who threw himself between me and bullets. The man who walked into a trap knowing he'd probably die just to get me back. She squeezed his hands. I'm not naive. I know what staying with you means, but I'm choosing it anyway. Why? The question came out raw, almost vulnerable. You could take the money, disappear, raise our child somewhere safe where no one knows who the father is. Why would you choose this life? Because I love you. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything she felt. And because our child deserves to know their father, deserves to have both parents, even if the circumstances are complicated. Luca's eyes closed, his breath shuddering out. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, he rested his hand against her stomach again, his expression softening in a way she'd never seen before. Tell me about the test, he said quietly. What did you think when you saw the results? I panicked. Ava's hand covered his, both of them touching the place where their child grew. I was supposed to sign the divorce papers that day, supposed to walk away and start over. And suddenly there were 2 pink lines telling me that walking away was impossible, that we were connected in a way that couldn't be undone by paperwork or time or distance. Were you going to tell me? Yes. I was trying to when you called, when everything went to hell. I had the test in my purse, was working up the courage to show you. She paused. I was scared you'd think I did it on purpose, that I got pregnant to trap you or get more money, or I would never think that. His voice was firm, certain. You're the most honest person I know, Ava. Even when you were playing a part, you never pretended to be something you weren't. You never lied about who you are or what you wanted. I lied about my feelings. Let you think I was just in it for the money, when the truth was I'd started falling for you months ago. That makes 2 of us. He shifted to sit beside her on the sofa, pulling her against his side. I told myself it was just physical attraction, that you were convenient and beautiful, and I was allowed to enjoy the arrangement while it lasted. But somewhere around month 3, I started making excuses to see you more. Started calling you just to hear your voice. Started caring what you thought, what you wanted, whether you were happy. When did you know? Ava asked, settling into his warmth. When did you know it was more than the arrangement? Luca was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing absent patterns on her arm. There was a charity gala, 4 months in. You wore a red dress that made every man in the room stare, and I wanted to kill every single one of them for looking at you. He paused. But that wasn't what did it. What got me was later, when we left. There was a homeless woman outside the venue, and you stopped to give her your coat. It was freezing, and you gave her your coat and then stood there shivering in that red dress while you talked to her like she mattered, like she was a person, not just scenery. Ava remembered. She'd been cold the rest of the night, but the woman's grateful tears had been worth it. I watched you, Luca continued, and I realized you were the most genuine person I'd ever met. In my world, everyone wants something. Everyone has an angle. But you gave away your coat and expected nothing in return, and I thought, his voice roughened, I thought I'd never met anyone like you. And I knew right then that when the 6 months ended, letting you go was going to destroy me. So why did you still prepare the divorce papers? Because that was the deal. And because I thought maybe if I let you go, you'd have a chance at a normal life, away from my world, away from the violence and the danger. His arm tightened around her. I was trying to do the right thing, even though it was killing me. And then everything went to hell, and I had the perfect excuse to keep you. That's a terrible reason to be glad someone framed me for theft. I never said I was proud of it. His lips brushed her temple. But I'm not going to apologize for wanting to keep you safe, for wanting to keep you, period. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling in the hearth, the night quiet around them. Ava's hand stayed resting over Luca's where it touched her stomach, both of them connected to the life growing between them. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "Adrian's dead, but you said there are other enemies, other people who will see me as a weakness. Now I make it clear that touching you means death." Luca's voice went cold, the crime boss emerging from the tender lover. "I call a meeting with the families, explain what happened with Adrian, and establish new rules. You're not just my wife anymore. You're the mother of my child. In my world, that means something. It means protection, respect, boundaries that can't be crossed without consequences. Will they accept that? They don't have a choice." His certainty was absolute. "I'm the most powerful man in this city, Ava. I didn't get there by being weak or letting people dictate terms to me. The families will accept it because the alternative is war, and I've already proven tonight that I'm willing to burn everything down to protect you." The reminder of this warehouse, the gunfire, the bodies, the calculated violence should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel safe. Luca Moretti was a dangerous man, but that danger was focused on protecting her and their child. In his world, that was love. "I want to stay with you," Ava said quietly. "Not because I'm trapped or afraid or because the arrangement says I should. I want to stay because I choose this, choose you, choose us. Even knowing what it means, the security, the restrictions, the fact that our child will grow up in this world, our child will grow up loved and protected. They'll have a father who would do anything to keep them safe, and a mother who chose their family even when it was hard." She turned to look at him. "That's more than a lot of kids get, Luca. More than I had." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I'm going to make mistakes. I don't know how to do this. The husband thing, the father thing, I'm going to mess up. So will I, but we'll figure it out together." "Together," he echoed, like the word was a revelation. "I've spent my whole life alone, even when surrounded by people, making decisions alone, carrying everything alone. The idea of having someone to share it with..." He stopped, his voice catching. "It's terrifying and perfect, and I don't want to screw it up." "Then don't." Ava's hand covered his heart, feeling the steady beat beneath her palm. "Don't push me away when things get hard. Don't hide things from me because you think I can't handle it. Don't treat me like I'm fragile or helpless. I'm strong enough for this, Luca. I'm strong enough for you." "I know you are." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "You survived Adrian. Survived everything I dragged you into. You're the strongest person I know." The exhaustion that had been building finally crashed over Ava in a wave she couldn't fight. She yawned, her body going heavy against Luca's side. "Come on," he said gently, standing and lifting her into his arms again. "You need rest, real rest, in a real bed where no one's going to attack us." "You can't know that for certain," Ava mumbled against his shoulder. "This place is completely off-grid. No one knows about it except Marco and 2 other people I trust with my life. We're safe here." He carried her down a hallway to a bedroom that was all warm wood and soft fabrics, setting her carefully on the bed. "I'm going to make some calls, check in with Marco, handle the aftermath of tonight. Will you be okay alone for a bit?" "I'm not an invalid. I can handle being alone for half an hour." "I know, but after everything..." He stopped, his jaw tight. "I don't like letting you out of my sight." "I'll be fine. Make your calls. Do what you need to do." She caught his hand before he could turn away. "But Luca, come back. Don't disappear into work and leave me here wondering if you're having second thoughts." "Never." The word was fierce, absolute. "I'm coming back. That's a promise." He kissed her once more, then disappeared, leaving Ava alone in the quiet bedroom. She could hear his voice in the distance, speaking rapid Italian into his phone, his tone sharp and commanding. The crime boss handling business, making sure the world knew that attacking his family came with consequences. Ava pulled off her ruined clothes, finding a soft t-shirt in the dresser that smelled like Luca, his scent, his space, his secret refuge. She pulled it on and climbed under the covers, her hand resting on her stomach as exhaustion pulled at her. A baby. In 7.5 months, she'd be holding a child that was half her and half Luca Moretti. The thought was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. She had no idea how to be a mother, especially to a child born into this world of violence and power. But she'd figure it out. They both would. She drifted off to the sound of Luca's voice in the distance, that deep rumble that had become synonymous with safety, and for the first time in days, she slept without nightmares. When she woke, pale morning light filtered through the curtains, and Luca was beside her in the bed, still dressed but stretched out on top of the covers. He'd been watching her sleep, his expression soft in a way he probably thought she'd never see. "How long have you been there?" Ava asked, her voice rough with sleep. "An hour, maybe. I finished the calls and came to check on you." His hand found hers under the blanket, their fingers lacing together. "You were smiling in your sleep. What were you dreaming about?" "Us. The baby. A future that doesn't involve people trying to kill us." "That's a nice dream." He pulled her closer, tucking her against his side. "For what it's worth, I'm going to do everything in my power to make that future real. No more threats, no more running, just us and our family. Can you really make that happen? Walk away from all of it?" "Not walk away, but restructure. Make things more legitimate, less violent." "I've been thinking about it for a while. Ways to transition the business into legal operations, cut ties with the parts that put us in danger." His hand moved to her stomach again, that protective gesture. "I want our child to grow up knowing their father isn't a monster. I want to be someone they can be proud of." Ava's throat tightened. "You're not a monster, Luca. I've done monstrous things. To protect people you care about, to survive in a world that doesn't forgive weakness. That doesn't make you a monster. It makes you human." She shifted to look at him properly. "Our child is going to be proud of you, because I'm going to make sure they know their father is the man who fought his way through hell to save their mother, the man who chose love over power, family over empire." "You make it sound noble, like I'm some kind of hero." "You're my hero. That's enough." Luca's kiss was slow and thorough, a claiming and a promise wrapped into one. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her lips. "Marry me," he said. Ava blinked. "We're already married. That was a contract, a business arrangement. I'm asking you to marry me for real. No deals, no money changing hands, no expiration date, just you and me choosing each other." Her heart stuttered in her chest. "You want to get married again?" "I want to stand in front of people who matter and vow to love you for the rest of my life. I want our child to know their parents chose each other, not because of circumstances or arrangements, but because we wanted this." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I want to marry you, Ava Bennett, properly, with witnesses who aren't on my payroll and rings that mean something more than a prop. Will you say yes?" Tears spilled over, tracking down her cheeks. "Yes. Of course, yes." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, rare and beautiful and transformative. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands tangling in her hair as 6 months of pretending fell away to reveal the truth underneath. They were in love. They were having a baby, and they were choosing each other, despite the danger and the complications and the violent world that surrounded them. The arrangement had ended the moment their hearts got involved. What replaced it was something far more powerful than any contract, a commitment born from choice, tested by fire, and strengthened by everything they'd survived. When Luca finally pulled back, his eyes were bright with emotion he no longer tried to hide. "The doctor's coming this afternoon. We'll make sure you and the baby are healthy. And then we start planning. The wedding, the future, all of it. What about your business, the families? I'm meeting with them tomorrow night. Marco's already setting it up. I'll handle the politics, establish the new rules, make it clear that you're untouchable." His expression hardened slightly. "And I'll start the process of transitioning out of the dangerous operations. It'll take time, but I'm done risking you and our child for profit." "You'd give up your empire for us?" "It's not an empire without someone to share it with, and I'd give up everything I have before I'd give up you." His hand pressed firmly against her stomach. "Both of you. You're my family now. That comes first." Ava leaned into him, letting his strength surround her, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, she felt genuinely safe. Not because of the security or the safe house or the armed guards, but because of the man holding her. The man who'd proven over and over that he'd do anything to protect her. The morning stretched ahead of them, quiet and peaceful. Outside, the world continued its violent spin, rival families plotting, enemies regrouping, the constant chess game of power and territory. But inside this hidden sanctuary, Luca and Ava existed in a bubble of their own making, where the only things that mattered were the life growing between them and the future they were fighting to build. They'd started as strangers bound by contract. They'd become lovers hiding behind the arrangement. And now, finally, they were becoming what they should have been from the beginning: partners, equals, two people choosing each other despite every reason not to. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more threats, more complications, more moments where the violence of Luca's world crashed against the life they were trying to build. But they'd face it together, armed with truth and choice, and a love that had been forged in fire and blood. As Luca held her close and morning light painted the room in gold, Ava felt the last pieces of fear fall away. This was real. This was chosen. This was worth fighting for, and whatever came next, they'd survive it the same way they'd survived everything else. Together, fierce, and absolutely unwilling to let go. The doctor arrived just after noon, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, and a medical bag that looked like it had seen better days. Dr. Sarah Chen had been treating Luca's people for years, asking no questions and keeping every secret that crossed her examination table. She set up in the bedroom with efficient movements, pulling out equipment while Luca hovered near the door like a nervous sentinel. "You can stay or go," Dr. Chen said without looking up. "But if you stay, try not to look like you're planning to shoot someone. It makes the patients nervous." Luca's jaw tightened, but he moved to stand beside the bed, his hand finding Ava's. "I'm staying." "Figured as much," Dr. Chen smiled at Ava. "Let's see how you and baby are doing, shall we? Luca mentioned you've had a rough few days." "That's putting it mildly," Ava said, trying to keep her voice steady as the doctor began the examination. The past 48 hours felt like a lifetime. Kidnapping, violence, revelations that had changed everything. Now she was lying in a safe house bed while a doctor checked whether her baby had survived the trauma. Dr. Chen worked with practiced ease, checking Ava's vital signs, examining the bruises and cuts, asking questions about symptoms and timeline. When she pulled out a portable ultrasound machine, Luca's grip on Ava's hand tightened almost painfully. "This early, we might not see much," Dr. Chen warned as she prepped the equipment. "But we should be able to confirm the pregnancy and check for a heartbeat." Ava's own heart was hammering so hard she could barely breathe. What if the drugs had hurt the baby? What if the stress and violence had caused damage she couldn't see? Luca's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, his expression carefully controlled, but his eyes betraying his fear. The ultrasound gel was cold against Ava's stomach. Dr. Chen moved the wand slowly, her eyes fixed on the small screen. The seconds stretched into eternity. Then suddenly, a rhythmic whooshing sound filled the room, fast and strong and unmistakably alive. "There we go," Dr. Chen said, her smile widening. "Strong heartbeat, measuring right at 6 weeks, just like you thought." She turned the screen so they could see the tiny flutter on the monitor. "Everything looks healthy. No signs of distress from the trauma you experienced." Ava couldn't stop the tears that spilled down her cheeks. Beside her, Luca had gone very still, his eyes locked on the screen where their child's heart beat in rapid pulses. "That's our baby," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "That's really our baby." "That's really your baby," Dr. Chen confirmed. "Stubborn little thing, surviving everything thrown at it. Takes after the parents, I'd say." She printed out several images from the ultrasound, handing them to Luca, who stared at them like they were holy relics. Ava watched his face transform, the hardness softening, the careful control crumbling to reveal wonder and fear and love, all tangled together. Dr. Chen finished the examination, prescribing prenatal vitamins and rest. "No more getting kidnapped," she said sternly, "and try to avoid gunfights for the next 7.5 months. Your body needs to focus on growing this baby, not surviving death threats." "I'll do my best," Ava said weakly. "See that you do." Dr. Chen packed up her equipment, then paused at the door. "Luca, I've known you a long time, seen you do things that would give most people nightmares, but the way you looked at that ultrasound screen?" She smiled. "That's the real you. Don't forget it." After she left, Luca sat on the edge of the bed, the ultrasound images clutched in his hand. "I didn't think it would feel like this," he said quietly. "Seeing the heartbeat, knowing there's an actual life in there, I thought I'd be scared. And I am. But it's also amazing," Ava finished. "Yeah." He set the images carefully on the nightstand, then turned to face her fully. "I meant what I said this morning, about getting married again, doing things right, but I also want to tell you something else." "What?" "I'm done." His voice was firm, decided. After tomorrow night's meeting with the families, I'm starting the transition out of the criminal operations, all of it. I've already been working on legitimate business ventures, real estate development, construction companies, restaurants. It's going to take time to shift everything over, but I'm doing it. Ava's breath caught. You're serious? Completely. I want our child to grow up with a father who comes home every night, who doesn't have to look over his shoulder constantly, who builds things instead of destroying them. His hand moved to her stomach again, that gesture that was becoming second nature. I want to be worthy of you both. You already are. Not yet, but I will be. He kissed her forehead. Rest now. Tomorrow's going to be intense, and I need you strong. But rest proved difficult. Ava dozed on and off through the afternoon while Luca worked in the study, his voice carrying through the house as he made call after call, setting pieces in motion for the meeting that would determine their future. By the time evening fell, tension had settled over the safe house like a physical weight. Marco arrived just after dark, his shoulder bandaged but his expression determined. He and Luca closeted themselves in the study for over an hour, their voices low and serious. When they finally emerged, Luca's face was set in hard lines. Tomorrow night, he told Ava over dinner, all the major families will be there. I'm going to explain what happened with Adrian, establish the new boundaries regarding you and our child, and make my intentions clear about transitioning the business. Will they accept it? Some will. Others will see it as weakness and try to take advantage. His jaw tightened. But I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling them how things are going to be, and they can either accept it or deal with the consequences. What consequences? War. The word was simple and terrible. If anyone moves against my family, I'll bring the full force of everything I've built down on their heads. I've spent years establishing power, creating alliances, making sure I'm the strongest player at the table. Now I'm going to use that power to protect what matters most. The next day passed in agonizing slowness. Luca was tense and distracted, constantly checking his phone, coordinating with Marco and others whose names Ava didn't know. She tried to stay out of the way, reading a book she couldn't focus on, touching her stomach and trying to believe that everything would work out. As evening approached, Luca came to find her in the bedroom. He was dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than a car, every inch the powerful crime boss. But when he looked at her, his expression softened. I need you to stay here tonight, he said. Marco's leaving 3 men for security, but I don't want you anywhere near this meeting. I know. I understand. He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. If something goes wrong, don't. Ava pressed her fingers to his lips. Don't talk like that. You're going to go to this meeting, you're going to make them understand, and you're going to come back to me. To us. You sound so certain. Because I am. You're Luca Moretti. You don't lose. A shadow of a smile crossed his face. I love you. Whatever happens tonight, I need you to know that. I love you and our baby more than anything in this world. I love you too. Now go handle your business and come home to your family. He kissed her, deep and claiming and full of promise, then forced himself to pull away. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except Marco or me. Understand? I understand. She watched from the window as his SUV disappeared down the mountain road, red taillights fading into the darkness. Then she locked the door, checked that the security system was armed, and settled in to wait. The hours crawled past. 8 o'clock became 9, then 10. Ava tried to distract herself with television, but every sound outside made her jump. The 3 guards Marco had left were silent presences, professionals who communicated in hand signals and said nothing to her. At 11:30, her phone buzzed. A text from Luca. Meeting running long, everything fine, love you. She texted back, love you too, be safe. Midnight came and went. Ava dozed on the sofa, one hand on her stomach, trying not to imagine worst-case scenarios. At 1 in the morning, she finally gave up and went to bed, though sleep felt impossible. She must have dozed off anyway, because she woke to the sound of a car engine and voices outside. Her heart leapt as she recognized Luca's deep rumble. She was out of bed and at the door before she could think, yanking it open despite his instructions to wait. Luca stood in the entryway talking to Marco, both men looking exhausted but uninjured. When he saw her, his entire expression transformed. He closed the distance between them in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms and holding on like he'd never let go. It's done, he said into her hair. It's over. Ava pulled back to look at his face. What happened? What did they say? Let's sit down. I'll tell you everything. They moved to the living room, Luca keeping her tucked against his side on the sofa. Marco disappeared to debrief with the security team, leaving them alone. The families accepted the new terms, Luca began. Not all of them happily, but they accepted. You're officially untouchable. Harming you or our child means immediate and total war with me. Victor Castellano tried to push back, said I was letting personal feelings compromise business, but the others shut him down. Why? I thought they'd see it as weakness. Because I didn't present it as weakness. I presented it as evolution. His hand found hers, their fingers lacing together. I told them I was transitioning my operations to become more legitimate, that the era of outright violence and criminal enterprise was ending. The families that adapt will prosper. The ones that don't will be left behind. And they just accepted that? Some did. The younger generation especially, they've been looking for a way to go legitimate without losing face. I gave them cover to do it. He paused. The old guard is less happy, but they're also pragmatic. They see which way the wind is blowing. Staying in open conflict with me would cost them more than adapting. What about Victor? Luca's expression hardened. Victor and I came to an understanding. He doesn't have to like my choices, but he will respect them. And in exchange, I won't cut him out of the legitimate business opportunities that are coming. So it's really over? The threats, the danger, all of it? I won't lie to you. There's always going to be some level of risk. What I was, what I built, that doesn't disappear overnight. His thumb traced circles on her palm. But the immediate danger is gone. Adrian's dead. The families have accepted the new boundaries, and I'm actively working to get us out of the criminal operations. In a year, maybe 2, we'll be completely legitimate. Relief crashed over Ava in a wave so strong it left her breathless. We're really going to be okay. We're really going to be okay. He pulled her closer, his hand moving to rest on her stomach. Our baby is going to grow up safe. That's all that matters. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of the past week finally lifting. Then Luca shifted, reaching into his jacket pocket. I have something for you, he said, pulling out a small velvet box. Ava's heart stuttered. Luca, open it. Inside the box was a ring. Not the platinum band from their contract wedding, but something entirely different. A simple white gold band with a single diamond, elegant and understated and absolutely perfect. I bought this 6 months ago, Luca admitted. The day after that charity gala where you gave away your coat. I saw it in a jeweler's window and thought of you. Beautiful without being ostentatious, real and solid and meant to last. He took the ring from the box, his hands surprisingly steady. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that buying a ring for a contract wife was the height of stupidity, but I bought it anyway and kept it in my desk drawer, taking it out sometimes when I was alone. Tears blurred Ava's vision. You've had it this whole time? This whole time, waiting for the moment when I'd be brave enough to admit what it meant. He took her left hand, sliding off the platinum band from their contract wedding. This ring represented a lie, a business deal. I don't want you wearing it anymore. He set the old ring aside and lifted the new one. Ava Bennett, will you marry me? Not for money or protection or because circumstances demand it. Marry me because you choose to. Because you love me despite my flaws and my past and the darkness I carry. Marry me and build a life with me and raise our child knowing that every day I choose you back. Yes. The word came out choked with emotion. Yes, I'll marry you. I choose you, Luca. I'll always choose you. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for this moment all along. Then he kissed her, deep and slow and full of everything they'd been too afraid to say for 6 months. When they finally broke apart, they were both crying, both smiling, both holding on like they'd finally found something worth never letting go. When? Ava asked. When do you want to get married? Soon as we can arrange it. His hand covered hers where the ring sparkled in the lamplight. I want to marry you before the baby comes. Want our child born to parents who chose each other freely. What about your family? Won't they expect something big, something traditional? I don't care what they expect. This wedding is for us, not them. He pulled her closer. Just us and the people who matter. Something small and real and honest. 3 months later, on a crisp morning in early summer, Ava stood in front of a mirror in a private room at a small chapel in upstate New York. The dress was simple, white silk that skimmed over her growing belly, which was just starting to show at 5 months pregnant. White roses were woven through her hair, and the ring Luca had given her sparkled on her finger. Through the door, she could hear soft music playing and the murmur of voices. They'd kept the guest list tiny. Marco and a handful of Luca's most trusted people, Dr. Chen, and a few of Ava's co-workers from her nursing days who'd become friends. No media, no spectacle, no performance for the families or the world. Just them, choosing each other in front of the people who mattered. A knock on the door made her turn. Marco stuck his head in, his usually stern expression softening. "You ready? Boss is about to wear a hole in the floor pacing." Ava laughed, her hand moving instinctively to her stomach. "I'm ready." She walked down the short aisle on her own, no one giving her away because she wasn't property to be transferred. She was her own person, making her own choice, and every step toward Luca felt like coming home. He waited for her at the altar in a dark gray suit, his eyes locked on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. When she reached him, he took her hands, and she could feel the slight tremor in his fingers, this powerful, dangerous man nervous about marrying her for real. The ceremony was brief and beautiful. They'd written their own vows, words that meant something more than tradition. "Ava," Luca said, his voice rough with emotion. "6 months ago, I hired you to play a part, to stand beside me and pretend to be something you weren't. But you were never pretending. From the beginning, you were exactly who you are. Honest, brave, kind even when the world gave you no reason to be. You showed me that strength doesn't have to mean violence, that power can be used to protect instead of destroy. You made me want to be better, to build instead of tear down, to choose love over fear." His hands tightened on hers. "I vow to spend the rest of my life being worthy of you, to protect you and our child with everything I have, to choose you every single day, not because a contract says I should, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it. I love you, Ava. Today, tomorrow, always." Ava's vision blurred with tears as she spoke her own vows. "Luca, I signed a contract thinking I was selling 6 months of my life for money. Instead, I found something I didn't know I was looking for, a partner, a protector, someone who saw me when I felt invisible. You're not perfect. You've done things that scare me, chosen violence when I would have chosen peace. But you've also shown me that people can change, that darkness doesn't define us if we choose to walk toward the light." She squeezed his hands. "I vow to stand beside you not as your property or your contract wife, but as your equal partner. To love you through the easy days and the hard ones. To raise our child knowing their father is a man who chose to transform himself for the people he loves. I choose you, Luca Moretti. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because you're worth choosing every single day." The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and when Luca kissed her, it tasted like new beginnings and promises kept. The small gathering erupted in applause, and Ava felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe? Or the certainty that she'd made the right choice. The reception was held at a restaurant Luca owned, intimate and warm. They cut a small cake, danced to music that made Ava's heart swell, and celebrated with the people who'd stood by them through the worst. Marco gave a toast that was surprisingly emotional, talking about watching Luca transform from a man who trusted no one to someone willing to risk everything for love. As the evening wound down, Luca pulled Ava onto the small dance floor for one last song. His hand rested on her stomach, their baby moving beneath his palm. "Happy?" he asked. "Incredibly." She leaned into him, letting his strength support her. "This is everything I never knew I wanted." "Me too." He kissed her temple. "I have something to tell you. About the business." Ava pulled back to look at his face. "What?" "I finalized the last transfer this morning. All the criminal operations have been sold off or shut down. As of today, the Moretti family is completely legitimate." His smile was tentative, almost boyish. "I'm just a businessman now. Real estate, restaurants, construction. Boring and legal and safe." "Luca." Her hands framed his face. "You really did it." "I told you I would. Our child isn't going to grow up in that world. They're going to have a normal life, or as normal as we can make it." "What about the families, Victor and the others?" "Some followed my lead and went legitimate. Others didn't, but that's not my problem anymore. I'm out, Ava. Really, truly out. She kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it, gratitude and love and relief and joy all tangled together. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. "So what now?" she asked. "What does Luca Moretti do when he's not running a criminal empire?" "He goes home with his wife." His hand pressed against her stomach. "He prepares for his daughter to be born. He builds a life that's worth living instead of one that's just about survival." "Daughter? Did Dr. Chen tell you the gender?" "She might have mentioned it during the last checkup when you were in the bathroom." His smile widened at her mock outrage. "We're having a girl, Ava. A beautiful little girl who's going to have your eyes and your heart, and hopefully my survival instincts." "A daughter." Ava's hand covered his on her stomach. "We're having a daughter." "We're having a daughter," he echoed, wonder in his voice. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure she never has to question whether she's safe or loved or valued." They swayed together on the dance floor, the music soft around them, their future unfolding like a road they'd walked together. The arrangement that brought them together was long dead, replaced by something infinitely more valuable: choice, commitment, a love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. 4 months later, on a cold December morning, Isabella Rose Moretti entered the world with a cry that sounded like victory. Luca held his daughter for the first time with hands that shook. This man who'd held weapons steady in the middle of gunfights, reduced to trembling wonder by 7 pounds of new life. "She's perfect," he whispered, his eyes never leaving the tiny face. "She's absolutely perfect." Ava watched from the hospital bed, exhausted and elated in equal measure. "She has your nose." Poor thing. But he was smiling, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "Hello, Isabella. I'm your father, and I'm going to love you until my last breath." The baby's eyes opened, dark like Luca's, unfocused but searching. Her tiny hand wrapped around his finger, and something in Luca's expression cracked completely. Tears spilled down his cheeks as he held his daughter close, this fierce protector undone by the weight of new responsibility and overwhelming love. "I've got you," he promised her. "Nothing in this world will ever hurt you. I swear it." Ava knew he meant it, knew that Luca Moretti, former crime boss and dangerous man, had found his purpose not in power or empire, but in protecting the family he'd built from the ashes of their arrangement. They brought Isabella home to the penthouse Luca had renovated, baby-proofed and softened, transformed from a bachelor's fortress into a real home. The nursery was painted soft yellow with white furniture and a mobile of stars that turned slowly above the crib. Life fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Luca threw himself into his legitimate businesses with the same intensity he'd once applied to criminal enterprise. He came home every night, helped with midnight feedings, changed diapers with the focused determination of someone tackling a hostile takeover. He was, Ava thought, the most devoted father she could have imagined, fierce and gentle and absolutely committed. On their first anniversary of choosing each other, the real marriage, not the contract, they stood in the nursery watching Isabella sleep. She was 6 months old now, starting to sit up on her own, her dark eyes curious about everything. "Do you ever regret it?" Luca asked quietly. "Staying with me, tying yourself to everything I was?" Ava turned to look at him, this man who'd become her entire world. "Never. Not for a single second. Even though it started as a lie?" "It didn't start as a lie. It started as a transaction, but it became the truth somewhere along the way." She took his hand, pulling him closer. "We built something real from something fake, Luca. That's not a regret. That's a miracle." He kissed her, soft and sweet, then rested his forehead against hers. "I love you. More every day, which I didn't think was possible." "I love you too." Her hand moved to his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her palm. "Thank you for choosing me. For choosing us. Always." The word was a vow, a promise, a certainty. "I'll always choose you." Below them, the city glittered in the darkness. The same city where they'd met, where they'd pretended, where they'd nearly lost everything. But they'd survived, transformed by violence and fear, and ultimately by love that refused to be denied. The arrangement that brought them together was dead and buried. In its place was something infinitely more valuable: a marriage built on choice, a family created by love, and a future that stretched bright and hopeful ahead of them. Ava Bennett had signed a contract thinking she was selling 6 months of her life. Instead, She'd found a lifetime of love with a man who'd been willing to burn his entire world down to keep her safe. Luca Moretti had hired a wife thinking she was just another business transaction. Instead, he'd found the only person who could see past his darkness to the man underneath. Together, they'd built something beautiful from the ruins of what they'd been. A family, a home, a love that had survived everything thrown at it and emerged stronger for the trials. As they stood watching their daughter sleep, Luca's arms wrapped around Ava from behind, they both understood the truth that had taken them so long to see. Some contracts were meant to be broken. Some arrangements were never meant to last. But some loves, the ones worth fighting for, would endure forever. And theirs would be one of those loves, built on ashes and choice and the unshakable certainty that they'd found something worth protecting with every breath, every heartbeat, every moment they had left. The story that began with a business deal ended with a family. And that, they both knew, was the greatest transaction either of them had ever made.